Welcome into the Eighth and Grace podcast. I'm your host, Brandy Dawson. Today, my guest is Mary Marantz, and I'm so thankful to have her on with you guys today. Mary, I just want to let you know, first and foremost, as I'm looking at both of us here now in the video, we both have on spring colors today.
Yeah, we do.
You with your pink and me. So I was thinking when we first got started, I was like, whoa, I am really bringing the spring with me today. But at least we're kind of doing that together. So this is good.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. No more winter.
Yeah,
No more.
no more winter. Me either. The weather here in Charleston has been kind of crazy anyway. And so we will have our typical weather, and then all of a sudden it'll just be cold here out of
Yeah.
nowhere. So
Full
I'm
spring.
yes,
All that.
ready for
Yeah.
it. Yes. Okay, so I am so excited to have you here today. We will definitely be talking about your new book that is launching on April
Yeah.
29th, Underestimated.
That's great.
This is truly probably going to be one of my favorite topics. And I know that probably sounds crazy, but I think that all of us can say that we have somewhere in our own personal story that we've been a fighter, right? That we've had
Mm,
to come from the bottom or start from somewhere.
yeah.
And I really, as I was kind of digging into your information, I don't want to say that I was stalking you at all, but as I have been digging into your information, I really found a lot of similarities in our story. And
Mhm.
that is always so fun to do, especially when you're friends with someone on social media and you
Yeah.
only know each other as we comment or how we communicate on social media. When you start researching who you're going to have on your show and who our friends are going to be listening to. It's just amazing to have that relationship and kind of already know that our similarities will help us be able to flow and
Yeah.
have a good conversation.
Yeah.
So
Did I see in your
you
stories yesterday that you grew up in a trailer? Did I pick that up?
yes, that is
Yeah.
literally what I was going to say. And so my
Mm.
mom actually got pregnant with me when she was 15 years old.
Wow.
And so my parents lived in a trailer when my mom got pregnant with me. And I remember my mom saying to me when I was little that she had this dream, right? And she knew she was laying on the floor one night and she had been crying and was just crying about her life and her circumstances and her situation. I can only imagine how hard
Mhm.
it was at 15 and being pregnant. And she said that she had said to herself one day she could see. So the walls in their trailer was so thin,
Hmm.
there were cracks in the walls. Like she could
Yeah.
literally see the outside. And
Wow.
she said there was a house that kind of set up on a hill. And she said to herself, one day I will
Hmm.
live in a home. She wasn't talking about that it had to be a big home on a hill or anything, but that she was going to live in a home that felt like a home.
That's right.
And so that was a big part of her story. And of course, me growing up, not everyone can relate to your story of you growing up in a trailer or to
Mm.
mine. Not everyone can relate to your story that you not only grew up in a trailer, but then you also went to Yale and you went to law school. So
Yeah.
it may not be everybody's story, but it's mine, right?
Mm.
So when the questions probably come to you when you're being interviewed, I thought this interesting because I thought about this for a moment and I thought I'm sure to some people when they're interviewing you how amazing that sounds because that is absolutely one of
Mm.
the biggest parts of your story is how you overcame. But
Mm.
to me, it comes from the little girl that grew up that way. That's
Wow. I
always
love
been a
that.
fighter,
Yeah.
that's always been a fighter too. And so although our friends that are listening today may not be able to relate to the part of our story of growing up in a trailer, I could
Mm.
imagine that there's going to be friends that can relate to having to fight and
That's right.
having to fight to overcome. So
Mm.
I wanted to discuss with you today where where in your part of the story, coming from an underdog,
Mm.
from that perspective, where in your story did you know this is going to change? This is going to
Mm.
be different for me.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that question. And I love that whole setup because, yeah, you're right. There might be people listening who didn't specifically grow up in a trailer, but I think every person listening has had a moment where the world overlooked them or discounted them or looked right through them or
Absolutely.
didn't think they were going to do very much or period, full stop, and also
Right.
those times when we do it to ourselves. And on the
Amen.
cover of the book, it says, "Because the person counting you out the most just might be you." And, like,
You.
when I sat down to write this book, I did not think that's where it was gonna go. I thought it was gonna be 100% about when other people count us out because, that is a lot of my lived experience, being an introvert and a quieter person and a more deep thinker. I'm not usually the one in the room that's, like, rubbing all the elbows. I'm usually off in the corner with one person being like, "So tell me about your deepest fears in your childhood."
Right?
How did that go?
Exactly. Never any shallow conversation. We go right for the
Never.
deep, right? Yeah.
Never, never, never. And so to get to your question, being this deep thinker, for a long time in my life, I thought I was an Enneagram 3, the achiever. A couple years ago, I was told to look up the self-preserving 4, who is the like very like deep thinker, we see the beauty in the bittersweet, the melancholy, we feel all the feels, we think all the thoughts.
Right.
But we try to achieve our way into safety. And so from a very young age, I can remember being a very little girl, 4 or 5, and, I feel like God started talking to me at a very young age. I feel like he would come down to the window like a best friend, and I say in Dirt, my first book, that he would draw close enough to leave fog marks on the glass. And then he started
Mhm.
talking to me in the daylight hours, out in the yard, and once he did that, he was everywhere. He was in the bird stepping into flight off the branches, he was in the way you could still feel the sun when you closed your eyes, he was in the green of the grass down to the very pigment, he was in the cold, hard dirt that once you broke it up in your hands, you could, no matter how many times you washed it, you still couldn't let go of that feeling. He
Oh,
was
yeah.
color and fire and freedom and dirt. And so he was the one who told me at a very young age, Brandy, that one day he said, "One day I'm gonna put words to it, and then you'll see your story won't be wasted. The messy, the muddy, the hard, the broken, the beautiful. I'm going to put words to it, and you'll see that all of it was beautiful." And for me, and this is something we can probably talk about, I took that to mean that I had to go do something with my life that would make the beginning of my story okay, that would make the beginning of my story worth it. That if I could go out and achieve something so great and important with my life, that then my story would be redeemed. And God has
Right.
only been recently sort of talking to me about this idea of maybe all of it was beautiful just because it was the story I gave you. Not
Exactly.
not
From
as
the
a
beginning,
yeah,
right?
not as a means to an end, but because every step was important. Yeah.
Absolutely. As you were saying that, and that's what I thought about. It's a funny thing to me how when we're growing up and we see the way others look and the way others live,
Yeah.
that's when we start to think something's wrong with our
100%.
story, right? And it's not because either one of us where we lived or how we lived. In
Mm.
that moment, it was we thought there was something more. And
Well,
that was
yes.
because we were being told there was something more, right? And
Mm.
are those always outer voices, or is it what we see? We see through that distorted lens, right?
Yeah.
And so we start to think, and this is really emotional for me, this whole conversation, because I'm talking to you obviously as a 46-year-old woman who is a wife, a mother, a nurse practitioner, a
Mhm.
writer, a podcaster, all the things that we are, right? That we see ourselves that we do, but truly who we are, our identity is in him.
Yeah.
And when we thought that there was an identity crisis before,
Mhm.
he knew all along who we were. So, but I'm not even really talking to you in every aspect of this conversation from this 46-year-old woman. I feel parts of that little girl
Yeah.
rising up in me as we're having this conversation.
Mm.
It wasn't that there was anything wrong with where I lived or the trailer that I lived in. It was that everyone else thought there was something wrong with my life and my family because my
Mhm.
mom was 15 when she got pregnant,
Right.
because my family wasn't the good family, right? We were the least of these. But aren't
Mm.
we thankful for a God who will redeem a story, not from even what we looked like or where we came from, but he will redeem those who think we are the least of these. I mean, look at
That's
King
right.
David,
Yeah.
like everybody
Oh,
thought
yeah.
he was the least of these, right? And look at him. I was thinking about, as you were talking a second ago, chapter one of your book, starting over a rolling boulder. When I was reading on page 25 and I wanted to look at that, you talk about a dream that you had. And it was a dream that you had written actually in your book, Dirt.
That's
And
right.
it was about you having a dream. The trailer that you lived in was sinking,
Mhm.
and how you heard this voice tell you that it wasn't too late for you. There was still
That's right.
time, but you
Yeah.
had to lay down all of the junk.
Mhm.
And the really cool part of this story for me, before you even tell it, is I always had a dream when I was a little girl of running away from a tornado. And
Interesting.
I had to, know that I was in a safe place to be
Mm.
able to escape the tornado, but for you, you had to lay down the junk. What did
Yeah.
that what did that dream, what did that story, what did that look like? And I mean, how did
Yeah.
that play into the words in your book, Dirt, and the words in this book of Underestimated?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love this question. So let me just start by saying this is an actual real dream. This is not like
Right.
poetic license. I had this like
No.
I sat straight up in bed 3 a.m. from this
Yes,
dream.
absolutely, yes.
And in the dream, basically what had happened is that my husband Justin and I had gone to speak somewhere, like a school somewhere, and it was, snowy and icy everywhere. And we went in and we gave the talk and it went great. And then we were coming back outside and there were all these kids running around and they were playing and they were sledding. And we were with some sort of host who had brought us in to speak. And suddenly we all started to hear this like ominous crack, crack, crack of the ice giving way. And this whole town was sinking. And, the host basically said, like, I can get you out of here. And then the scene changed just like that. And I was in that trailer that I grew up in, just as if it were like frozen in time from the last time that I saw it, last time I lived there. And I was in my parents' bedroom in particular. And my dad would always do this thing. He's a logger and he would come home and he would like empty out his pockets on the dresser there. And they always had this mixture of like clumps of mud and, nuts and bolts and parts from
Mhm.
like the dozer and just a bunch of coins. And then my mom always had like a few like little like necklaces laid out on a jewelry box and then some stacks of sweaters where she left when I was 9, and so like from like packing up when she left when I was 9. And I grabbed a garbage bag and began to fill it with whatever I could, and I planned to go to my bedroom on the other end of the trailer and shove as many ratty stuffed animals and like musty sweaters of my own as I could in there. And but I was still in my parents' bedroom. I felt the trailer shake loose from the ice and it started rocking side to side. And every time it would rock to one side, it would dip below the freezing line and this icy water would rush in and I was grabbing at my ankles. And it was, getting pretty dire, getting pretty serious that this whole
Right.
trailer was going to go under. And I heard this voice that said, well, there's still time for you. We can still get you out, but you first have to be willing to lay this junk down. And in Dirt, I talk about it as like all of these things that stood for something I thought they always meant that they no longer stand for. This scarcity mindset, this evidence of something that was always lacking, that was never enough. And that we have to be willing to lay that junk down if we are going to get to where we're going. And so fast forward to Underestimated, which is sort of like I've been lovingly calling it a textbook twin to Dirt. If Dirt is like the memoir version of my, very hard story,
Right.
this is sort of like okay, let's go back and understand why I was the way I was, why that marked me the way that it did, and how we undo
Yes.
that.
Mhm.
And so Underestimated has this whole metaphor of pushing a boulder up the mountain, and you keep dropping the boulder just when it's about to, you're about to reach your breakthrough moment, and it rolls all the way back down to the beginning. And it's just talking about if we are going to get to where we're going, we have to go back and like bust the lid off of our story and ask ourselves what made us think we had to push so hard in the first place and what made us think we had
Right.
to carry all this heavy junk with us.
Right.
And it sort of just like kicks off the book of unpacking all of that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, of being able to unpack, and like you said, you've also said that criticism is an inside job.
Mm, yeah.
And so you have to begin unpacking. And I think that's one of the things that in our lives um, that we fail to understand before we start unpacking is that not always is it from external factors. It's things
Mm,
that we have held on to and the
yeah.
scenes that we've held on to in our lives that we believe to be the truth that was never the truth to begin with. And we've
Right.
carried all of these heavy things. And like you said, you gather in your ratty stuffed animals and gather in your musty sweaters, but in reality, it wasn't those things that you were gathering. You were picking up the things that eventually you were going to be unpacking. And to me, that is just so phenomenal. Also, in chapter 6 of your book, Get Underestimated, you talk about imposter syndrome and how
Yeah.
it's a sheet of thin ice. And so when you just talked about the dream, of
Right?
being on the ice, and then how imposter syndrome is a sheet of thin ice. It's beautiful to me how that was chapter 1. Now we're in chapter 6, and these just continue to build
Ooh, I
upon
love that how
one
you
another.
connected those.
Yes,
Ooh!
absolutely. On page 85, you wrote, you had asked yourself the question, what if success is where the real trouble began?
Mhm.
And that is where I want us to go now,
Yeah.
because I love, do not get me wrong, I love a good underdog story. I am an underdog. I came from that. I stand for that. I believe in locking arms with women in the kingdom who are living on mission, that need to be pulled up from the pit to
That's
know
right.
that of who they are. But I like to know the other side of the story, but this is so amazing. I love the unpacking. The unpacking
Mhm.
is what's so important. It doesn't really matter where we are now, right? It doesn't matter what success looks like to us now. If we are trying to help someone along and tell them, or not even tell, I don't like the word tell, to encourage them to know this is not the end.
That's
God
right.
is still writing your story.
Mhm.
I love to encourage people where they can see where this started from. I
Mhm.
think sometimes we can, it depends on where you, I could come into your life right now and I just know who Mary is today. And I see
Mhm.
all of these accolades and all of these beautiful things. But if I don't know the parts of Mary that got you here,
Yeah.
then I don't know what it cost you to get here. And
Mm,
that was
right.
one of my favorite parts of where you said that trouble could be, I mean, success could be the real trouble. So what
Yeah.
did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically, that's also from dirt. So, like, that's what I mean by, like, so I have dirt and I have slow growth.
Right?
Slow growth was sort of Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots is my second book. It was sort of
Yes.
the devotional companion to
Hmm.
dirt. And that book's really about giving up achieving for your worth. To, like, if,
Yes.
if dirt is making peace with your past and your story, then slow growth is giving up achieving for your worth. And underestimated is how once we do all that, we now move forward and quit playing
Yes.
small.
Right.
And so when I talk about that, it's very shortly after I've gotten the, notice, the phone call in England that I've gotten into Yale for law school, which is contrary to what Reese Witherspoon would tell you or Elwood would tell
Right.
you, it's the number one law school. Um,
Exactly.
they've actually what's funny is they in the last couple of years have actually even pulled out of the rankings. A bunch of the top law schools did, but when there were rankings, it was the number
Right.
one.
Right.
And so you know, we have all of these things we tell ourselves, all of these mile markers in the distance, these blank spaces about when I get there or when I get that, then I will feel like I've arrived. And
Mhm.
so to go from a single wide trailer to the number one law school in the country and to still not feel like enough, to
Right.
still feel like I was walking around as one big sizzling synapse of a raw nerve ending. There's a part in dirt where I compare it to like a root canal the size of a chest wound, where every time
Right.
the air would hit just right, it would send all these roots screaming back into existence. And you would try to
Mm.
backfill it with all these gold stars and these, brand name labels trying to like backfill the hole in your
Mhm.
heart.
Right.
And if that wasn't enough, that was both a really frustrating moment with myself. There's a part in that passage where I say, scream at my thin epidermis, what more could you possibly want? You have everything
Want.
you've ever asked for. Why are you still screaming?
Right.
And and it's also a moment of release and freedom
Mm.
because you go, okay, so if that kind of a upward explosion from single wide trailer to Yale Law School in one generation, if
Right.
that's not gonna be enough to fill the hole in my heart and to silence this, like, screaming more and more and more and more, then what that means is probably nothing will. And so maybe
Amen.
we can stop chasing now. Maybe we can
Right.
stop thinking that there's any amount of more that can make us stop feeling less than, and we can lean into this idea that it's an unpacking and an inside job. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so in underestimated, how those 2 relate to me and how you have correlated those and brought those together, it's absolutely beautiful to me. It
Yeah.
is beautiful to me to be able to walk through that story and not only to see the hard, but to see that the hard is holy, and not
Yeah.
only to see the good parts, but to see the parts that have brought you here. And like you said, to continue to wonder why. what is it going on in me? What is wrong with
Mm,
me? Is it because of the words that have been spoken to me or over me? Or is
yeah.
it the words that are coming within? Like, what keeps bringing me back to this place of why I'm never enough? What
Yeah.
could do that? And what moment for you, Mary? Like, where was it before you wrote Underestimated? How far, I guess, but how long before you had written Underestimated did you get to that point when you knew that? Or did you even learn some of that about yourself while you were writing the pages of Underestimated?
Yeah. I mean, they say, like, you write the book you need first and foremost, for sure.
Absolutely.
And I would say that before writing Underestimated, I had begun the work of, not paying too much attention to when other people would underestimate me. I mean, it still super annoyed me or, got me all riled up, but I would use
Right.
it. I would use it as jet fuel, "Underestimate me, that'll be fun," as the T-shirt
Right.
says.
Exactly.
Um,
Go ahead and do that, girl. Go
yeah.
ahead and try that, right?
But the problem is, and I think this was the real work of writing this book, is, like, all the ways we do it to ourselves. And
Right.
and I think even here's the big one. You mentioned, like, you love being an underdog and you love a good underdog story, but the journey for all of us in this book, here's a little bit of a spoiler alert, is chapter 14, the last chapter starts off with these sentences. If you are not careful, no, sorry, the underdog is a role of a lifetime. And what I mean by that is if we are not careful, we could spend our whole lives playing that part.
Absolutely.
And if we're not careful, underdog can turn into, I expect you to reject me, so I reject you. I expect you to overlook me, so I take any perceived slight and try to turn it into the fuel I'm using.
Yes.
I expect to walk through this what life really lonely because nobody will be for me, so I have to be for myself. And we
Right.
can then turn underdog into victim.
Victim and live that
Yeah.
victim mentality.
Yes.
Yeah. You
100%.
know, I say that, quite a bit. When I'm really angry at the enemy, and I'll be like, "You just don't," literally, before I pick up my sword and I start fighting him back with the word, I'm like, "You really just don't know that the lies that you're trying to come in and tell me, I've already thought worse about myself than you.
Yeah.
I've already thought there's really probably nothing that you could dig into my past and say about me, or that you could say about me even now that I haven't already thought, right?" And so
Mm,
there comes that line to where we have to stop living in that lie and
yeah.
in the underdog mentality, because that will lead us to to live as a victim,
Mm,
and it allows us to want to hold on to that identity instead of the identity that we have been redeemed, that we
that's right.
have been restored, that we walk in freedom, that we live fully awake in the light, and that we are loved. And
Mhm.
I think one of the hardest parts for me along my story and the journey of feeling like an underdog and feeling underestimated was there was just a time in my life where I thought that I had to strive for the love of God. I thought I had to earn
Mm,
it. And I really didn't understand, Mary, that we don't have to earn God's love. We live from it. And
yeah.
once we learn that we live from a place of His love, we stop fearing His love. And
Mm,
truly, we really stop fearing what others think about us, because at that point, we start grasping a hold of who we really are, and we
yeah.
start walking in that. And like you said earlier, I love it how you said when you go into a room and you don't stand there with the who's who's, right? The ones who've
Mhm.
made it, the ones who everybody's celebrity crushing on. And that's one of the things, even in Christian culture right now, that I'm so thankful that finally we're unpacking that, and that
Right.
fallow ground's like being packed and uncracked and open, and we're going back
Mm,
to the heart of what matters, and it's
right.
Him, and it's that all of this is for the glory of God and for the good of others, right?
Yeah.
But I love how you said in a room, you would be, the one kind of
Don't send
with
me with
the
the cool
ones.
kids. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you
No
can.
no desire.
Absolutely. But isn't it amazing? Like, you would be the one to say, okay, this is my table. You can sit here.
Mm,
There's a place for
right.
you at my table.
Yes.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's because of how amazing is it now to get to be that woman who sees
Mm,
you in other women,
that's right.
and you see that little girl who thinks those things about herself. And as you're
Mhm.
talking with others, and you can sense that, and you
Yes,
can say, you know what, girl, you've got a place here.
that's right.
I've been there, girl, me too. I've been there.
Mm, that's
And
right.
I love that. I also, um, think you went to chapter 14 and I was going to take you to chapter 8.
Yeah, let's
In
do it. Listen,
chapter
all
8,
around, all
yes, I
around. For
know. I
everybody who's
literally,
listening, somebody asked me the other day, and I was like, "Oh, I really have to think about this." They asked, like, so just for everybody who's listening, each chapter is a different face of fear. So there's a perfectionism chapter, procrastination, people pleasing, imposter syndrome, overthinking, criticism, failure, success, self-sabotage,
yes,
second guessing, not enough, and one more that I'm probably forgetting. There's 14 of them all in total, starting over. And they asked, "Can you just like flip to the one that you need?" And I was like, "Okay, you can." And I
right,
certainly love that you'll be able to do that after you've like as like teacher Mary, Professor Mary. I'm
right.
not really a professor, just in my own mind. I want people, because the way that I teach and the way that I write is like you said, every chapter's building
It's
on the ones that
building.
came before. So read it start to finish, but then you can bounce around from chapter to chapter. So
And you
you've done
can
that,
pick
and now we
out.
can bounce. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I've read it. So now I can
Yeah.
bounce around and pick out the parts that I'm like, this is so important. And like you said, though, from chapter 1 to chapter 14 of your book, Underestimated, it is truly, I want to say it's a girl's book. You know, I hate to leave
Ooh.
the men out, but this
Yeah.
really
Oh, yeah.
is for your girl's girl. This is for all of us. There
Mhm.
truly is. And like I said, I think that all of us have something in this book that we can relate to. Every single one of us have been through these phases that you're talking about, and some of us are still there.
Yeah.
Some of us haven't made it through this yet. Some of us
Mm.
aren't on the other side, and that's why it's so beautiful to me that you read the book and then you can pick out these pieces, and then we lock arms with other women, right? We were never meant to
Mhm.
do this alone.
Right.
I said this past week, I said, the enemy of our souls would like us to isolate, but
Oh, yeah.
never let isolation become your solitude, because if
Mm.
so, you will live in that victim mentality,
Mhm.
because you will always feel like you're alone and you will never feel like you're enough or that you're loved. And that was one of the hardest things, I think, for me, was to grasp a hold of. I was truly loved by God
Mm.
just because of who he was. Because
Yeah.
I never felt good enough. And guess what? The thing is, I'm not. I'll never
Mm.
be good enough, right? To
Mhm.
earn the love of God.
That's right.
It's just because of who he is. And I think when we can start seeing things in that light and to the truth of his word, then we can hold on to the parts of knowing, maybe I didn't never have to worry about being good enough at all. Maybe just
Yeah.
because I'm a king's kid, I've always been
Mm.
worthy enough to do exactly what he called me to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but in chapter 8, I'm glad you mentioned procrastination a second ago. Of course, this is your book, so you know where these chapters go and what they mean. But right now, I'm in seminary school.
Okay.
I have, I'm in the women's leadership cohort at Denver Seminary. I
Nice.
have a research paper due tomorrow,
Okay.
and I'm
And
going
you're
to
hanging out with
pray.
me?
Yes, I'm going to pray that my professor is not listening. She doesn't know what day this is being recorded, but I have a 6 page. It's actually, once it's 3 part, and once it's done, it'll be 20 pages. But anyway, it's due tomorrow. And have I procrastinated a little bit?
A little bit.
And so I love the fact that I picked this specific chapter out purposefully and intentionally for me, kind of selfishly. But I think it's going to be good for everyone. But procrastination is a double-edged sword. And I
Mm.
love that you talk about how you always felt terrible to procrastinate, but
Mhm.
yet you had made friends with the terror. And no matter what we will do, we'll never be good enough. That was the fear kind of behind that.
Mhm.
And I thought about that before we started this interview, and I thought that just summed up for me why I feel so behind on researching this paper,
Mhm.
because I still wonder, do I even belong in the room?
Yeah.
Do I even belong in seminary? Did
Right.
they pick the right girl? And that is not okay. That's not being humble. That's hiding. That's hiding behind the
Mhm.
purpose and our identity and who God's called us to be.
That's right.
And so when I read this, I thought, I wanted to ask you, when you wrote this, what did this mean to you? Where were you coming from in this
Mm.
place
Yeah.
of it, that you were never going to be good enough and fear
Mm.
was keeping you bound and procrastinating?
Yeah. Oh boy, yes, yes, yes. Procrastination and I have been lifelong friends, lifelong friends. So let me kind of like break apart a few different sections of that. The terror is the name I have given my procrastination all the way back in college.
Right.
In college was the first time I realized that they always talk about like Anne Lamott and her crappy first drafts, like just get it down and then go back and fix it later. And that's such great advice for writers generally. Everybody take that in. For me personally, starting all the way when I was in college, if I tried to do that, I actually found it more stressful thinking about how I was going to have to go back and fix it later. Because, like, my best work just truly will not show up until I feel the terror. The
Right.
terror is like this moment. I kind of joke in the book. It's like when, like, vampire venom in a wildly popular YA novel shoots through your veins, and suddenly there's a crystallizing clarity, and all the words just pour out of you. And I think anybody in college who had an all nighter to finish a paper knows that feeling. Suddenly, you're just like a prolific writer, and the words were there all along. And I've learned to make peace with the terror I talk about in the book, and almost kind of like in the same way we harness other people doubting us as jet fuel, I would kind of harness that as like, well, I'll use the terror to get my best work to show up. And so, much like the whole book and much like Mary in general, this is a very nuanced chapter where it gives honor to the fact that some of us just are wired where I go into the depth on the science of this, where it's talking about like active procrastination versus passive procrastination, and like non-adaptive versus adaptive, and just the different types. Or is it because you're overwhelmed? Is it because you don't you're afraid of being criticized? Is it afraid because you're a perfectionist? Or is it because you like truly like love the thrill of pulling it off at the last minute? And it's not to say that it can't be a bad thing, like used to extremes, but just it really gets into the nuance of like there are different kinds of procrastination. And so I talk about that line you mentioned of when I procrastinate, I always feel horrible when I procrastinate. And what I mean by that is that I don't feel bad for procrastinating. That part's true too. What I mean by that is that I actually feel like I'm getting the flu.
Right.
I'll feel like my joints will get achy. I'll feel like I have a fever. I'll, feel like I just want to eat ginger ale and crackers and curl up on the couch and sleep for hours. And it turns out that's a very real thing. Your brain, which is wired to look for threats, will release some of the same chemicals as if you were being chased by a lion, as like, this project is scary to me. This
Right.
project makes me feel like no matter what I do, it won't be as good as I want it to be. So
Right.
then we turn to procrastination as what I call a double-edged cop-out, taken to extreme on either ends. On the one hand, if we procrastinate to the last minute, pull it off at the last minute, and get the A plus plus we've always dreamed of, we can go, you know, amazing. Just think about how much better it would have been even if I had more time.
Right.
On the other end, if we don't pull it off and we don't get the result we were hoping for, we always have a built-in excuse. Oh,
Right.
I was just up against an impossible deadline. I'm not a person who fails. I'm not a person who falls short. I was just in a bad situation this time. And so
Right.
we use it to protect ourselves on either end so that we don't have to confront. We no, none of us listening want to go, you've been given all the time in the world. You sat down and wrote your absolute best effort, and you've been graded accordingly. This is as talented as you are. Nobody wants that.
Right. Right.
We want to always be able to say, it would have been better if I had more time. There's a
Right.
reason I didn't come through. And so
Right.
James Clear actually talks about what I call the terror. He calls that moment the action line. And he
Uh-huh.
defines it as the moment when the far off future consequences we've been putting off suddenly become present day consequences. That moment of like, I might actually fail if I don't get moving on this,
Right.
which you're probably experiencing right now.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
that
exactly
moment,
why I wanted to discuss this. Yes.
that moment comes, and now all of that grip of fear, it's like I say in the book, in a weird, almost like fight fire with fire, I'm rubber, you're glue. We defeat fear, the fear that takes on the face of procrastination, by ever more fear, the fear that we
Right.
might actually not pull it off in time.
Right.
So that was a lot of
Right.
information, but I could talk
No,
a
that's
lot about
beautiful.
procrastination because I've lived
Well,
my life that way.
because I am I'm a recovering overthinker, and I'll never say that I'm recovered because I'm always in recovery of overthinking, but I'm also a recovering procrastinator. That's
Yeah.
not new to seminary school. That is how I've lived my life. And so I am very intentionally trying with God to process through this. And so that's why this whole chapter was so exciting to me. And that's why I brought up the certain pieces that I did and wrote the exact things that I wanted to cover because those were the points that I
Mm,
knew were relatable to me. And I thought, how many of our friends could that also be
yeah.
relatable to? And so, no, that was not too much information. That was perfect. Absolutely love it.
Good.
Also, I wanted to ask you if we had the opportunity to go back, if I could go back and talk to the little girl in me, or if you, Mary, could go back and talk to that little girl that was growing up in that trailer, or to any of our friends listening today who may still be in the fighting stage, who may still be fighting to get to the other side, what word of hope or encouragement could you give them to hold on to and carry with them to get
Mm,
to this part now of where we're underestimated, of living in the book of underestimated?
yeah. Ooh, I love this question. Here's what I'm gonna say. Here's what came up for me, especially because you kept saying this phrase, the other side, the other side.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I love rewarding early adopters. I love rewarding people who stay through the whole episode. I love, like, "Ooh, you have put in the time, you have committed," like, you're gonna get some, like, really juicy Easter egg behind the scenes, that kinda
Yeah.
spoiler alert sort of moments. So in chapter 14, so we're getting good, we're ramping up to the end there. Like I said, there's this whole metaphor of pushing a boulder up a mountain through the whole book, and there's also a repeating metaphor of, will you leap again the next time the ledge comes around? You leaped the first time, will you leap again?
Right.
And so I talk about, because my friends have kind of joked and said that this book is sort of like my Eras tour because we're just bringing in all the different things that are Mary, the movie quotes, the like love of like doing the research, the
Yes.
deep heart stories, the metaphors, and the lyrical writing. Like it is all there, and the business and the entrepreneur side. And so in business and entrepreneurship, there's something called the survival to success, survival to significance hierarchy.
Right.
And we talk about it as like what entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs, have to go through to take this thing that they love and turn it into a living. And so they
Hmm.
start off, there's start, and then there's you're barely just surviving. That's step
Hmm.
two. Then you start to get a little bit of stability, like it's kind of evening out. You're covering your bills. Then you even get to the point of security, like you have a little bit more than enough. Then you get to this place where people start calling you a success. And then at the very top is significance. And
Right.
Brandy, my whole life and my whole career, especially like that whole previous career I had as a photographer, I thought when I looked at that hierarchy and they draw it by like, like bar graphs attached to one another, it sort of looks like a mountain
Hmm.
up and to the right. And I thought my whole life, if you just push hard enough and long enough, you will inevitably arrive at significance. But a couple of years ago, I remember this as clear as day. I was standing in my living room on the second floor looking out the window. We live on the water here in Connecticut, which was a whole other story, this fixer upper by the sea we live in. And I was just sort of pacing, getting ready for a talk. And it was like in the book, I say it was like a slide projector, in and then out.
Hmm.
And the scene that flashed through my mind is that the bar graphs should actually look something like this. It's a steady climb from start all the way up to success, but there's actually a speed worthy, it's finished on the map gap between those last two bars, between success and true significance. And the name of that gap is that it finally stops being about you. We take a running leap and we get to the other side when we stop saying, my survival, my security, my stability, my success, my ability to matter in this world, my ability to sit at the cool kids table, my ability to make a name for myself, my ability to arrive. All of that is about us. We make our successes about us, but we make our, scarcity about us too. Our fears, our failures. What if we're embarrassed? Somebody who might criticize us, somebody who might hurt us.
Hmm.
When we stop saying what might go wrong and we start asking, yeah, but who might it help? That's when we can kind of get out of our own head and out of our own way and out of our own, those raw nerve endings, that root canal that's been
Hmm.
exposed as a chest wound. And we can actually just show up in peace with the good work that was prepared for us in advance. This purpose that was carved into the stars and knitted into our very fingerprints from the second that we were first an idea before we were ever an idea.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we show up and we say, I've been given these gifts and this story, and you need both of them. And the crosshair intersection where our deepest place of impact will come from our greatest points of empathy. It's a quote from my friend Kim Butler. We show up and we serve from that place, and what is for me will not pass me by.
That is right. Yes, that is
Yeah.
so good.
So if I could tell
So
a 5-year-old that and get her to understand it and save her 40
right,
years of
right,
chasing, I would do that. But I don't know,
right.
that's maybe I needed the 40 years to catch up.
Right, to be able to catch up.
Yeah.
So, our friends listening today, if they want to find your book, Underestimated,
Yeah.
how would our friends go about getting their hands on a copy of that?
Yeah, so if you go to namethefear.com or marymarantz.com, marantz.com/underestimated, either one will get you there. Namethefear.com, you can actually check out all the information about the book. We actually have the whole first chapter up for free. You can download that and start reading today. And then we also have some fun pre-order bonuses like the first 3 chapters and the audiobook. The audiobook I actually just finished reading a couple days ago. We did the final pickup, so I read it. If you've enjoyed listening to me, wax poetic about all of these different chapters, you're going to love the audiobook. It's a really fun way to kind of get 2 books for the price of 1.
Right,
And that's a great place to check out the book. And then one more fun thing I'll tell your people about is that in Slow Growth, I actually started the characters in that book, but they carry through into Underestimated, and they're just sort of all the different ways we try to show up and matter in the world and self-protect and perform. And it's we've taken those characters and turned them into a quiz. And so we have the performer who's always on their toes, trying to show both themselves and everybody else how far they've come. We have the tightrope walker who could care less who's clapping, but they need higher and higher death-defying heights in order to feel the same amount of good. We have the masquerader who hides in plain sight and shoves other people into the spotlight. The contortionist, who's our like classic people pleaser, who twists themselves up into tiny tethered knots because to contort is easier than to be criticized. And we have the illusionist in the distance who thinks they and all of the conditions around them have to be perfect before they can even begin. And so if you
right,
go to achieverquiz.com or marymarantz.com/quiz, you can take the quiz. It takes like 2 minutes, 10 minutes if you overthink it, but a very short amount of time. The questions are fun, and in true Mary form, the results go deep. So we will
right.
tell you based on your type why you get stuck, why you play small, why you get tripped up and in your own way, and how you actually move forward. And so that's achieverquiz.com and at Mary Marantz on Instagram. Come tell me what you thought of the episode, what your
Perfect,
achiever type
yes,
is. I want you to take it.
right?
I want to know what your achiever type is.
Oh, I'll definitely tell you what mine is. And that was the next question I was going to ask you. You answered it for me.
Oh, good.
I wanted our friends to know how to find you on social media
Yeah.
and on Instagram. And also a shameless plug for my friend Mary, who I'm so honored to have been able to spend time with today. And I pray that you guys have gleaned some hope and encouragement from her as well. But what in the world? Lord Jesus, I just lost my train of thought.
Believe me, I
Goodness,
get it. Woo! I'm gonna be 45 next month and the
I'm
hormones are real.
40. Yes, girl, I'm in postmenopause. So 46 and it is for real. But anyway, I just wanted to say that
There
for
was
our
a
friends.
plug you'd said.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Mary. So
Yep.
see that year I have older on here. You can still think and help me. But yes, a shameless plug for my dear friend Mary. I think personally that it is going to be necessary to need and read all 3 of those books. I
Oh,
think
I love that.
Underestimated is perfectly fine if they want to order that first, but I do believe after reading what I have read so far that Slow Growth and Dirt, it's very instrumental in the
Yeah,
building of this, the culmination of this book. I think it's
yeah.
just a beautiful part and
Thank
so relatable. You are one of my favorite authors, and I think it's like I said, it's just for
thank
our
you.
girls' girl all the way around.
Yeah,
So I hope
thank
that our
you.
friends have enjoyed hearing that today and enjoyed hearing from you. I say in our intro that we um, that I just pray that we have women on this podcast for our listeners that are my heroes that I pray or become our friends' heroes too, and
Yeah,
that they can glean from you. So,
I
Mary,
love
so
that.
thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you
And
so much.
I look so forward to April 29th for
Yeah.
Underestimated to be out. And also, I want our friends to know that it is so important to pre order the
Yes.
books.
I'm so glad you
Yes,
said that. Yes. People don't know
yes,
that. People do not realize that, like, if you love an author, if you want to make sure that authors who are doing excellent original work, authors that, just don't automatically have the millions and millions of fans or connections, like, if you love an author and you're like, "Oh, we need more of them in the world," pre-orders are truly the make or break, and I don't think a lot of
yes.
people know that. Yeah.
Yes. So that was my shameless plug. We need all three of those
I love
books,
it.
and we need to pre-order Underestimated so that it can truly get into the hands of the women that need this healing as
Yeah.
well.
Love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Until we
you.
speak next time, friend. Bye.
Bye.